Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Runewords. That's right, we got more new Runewords, and there's going to be a whole bunch of them coming up, so expect me to sugar blast your timeline with Runewords. This one in particular is the runeword Temper. Now, Temper is actually a pretty sexy one, to be honest, and is probably one of the best of the lot of new helmet runewords that they've added with this particular series. And the reason why this one is so good is just simply because it has the ability to give you, how do I put this? Essentially a merc that's invincible for Trav, right? So if you look at it on its face value, it actually is a pretty decent merc helm. First off, it has the 20% faster hit recovery, which is actually pretty darn nice for mercs. Mercs have terrible faster hit recovery frames, especially the Act 2 merc, which is the most popular. He has the worst faster hit recovery frames out of the lot. And to give you an idea of how bad his frames are, he has the same faster hit recovery frames as a sorceress. And the sorceresses are known for getting deathlocked. So even just 20% faster hit recovery can make a huge difference on your mercenary. With a relatively low level of only 35, I mean, you could reliably put this in just about any piece of three socket equipment. I mean, it's not really that big of a deal. And if you can find a nice F version, they tend to roll about like 270-ish defense on like on a nightmare level piece of equipment, which is not bad at all. And that comes in part due to the defense, which rolls from 75 to 100% defense bonus, and it's actually a pretty decent little defense bonus. The IO rune gives you a very nice 10 vitality, which of course doesn't help your mercenary because mercenaries don't actually have vitality. However, it will help your characters, and any character that's using this helmet is going to get a different amount of HP from this because of course vitality gives different values depending on the character. Sorceresses and necromancers, for instance, get the worst of it, and paladins and barbarians get the best of it. And I think druid has pretty terrible, like, per vitality HP points as well. It's just because they have so many ways to increase their HP, though. You know, Heart of the Wolverine, their werewolf and bear forms, and so forth. We also have increases maximum life 5%, which does work on the mercenary and is a pretty nice little bonus. Fire resistance that rolls between 40 to 60%. Of course, the Ral rune provides the 30%, and then we end up with another 10 to 30% coming from the rune word as rolls. And then we have a fire absorption which rolls as well between 10 to 15%, which is absolutely excellent. And this makes it a very nice Trav helm. Whether you're specifically farming Trav and you just want to put it on your head, or whether you're putting it on your mercenary to keep him alive from the murderous death mongering of the Hydra spam that is Travancore. In general, I think fire tends to be one of the more deadly elements to mercenaries, just simply because there's so many various passive ways that they can die to fire, whether it be firewall, meteors, hydras, or a freaking corpse explosion, like, you know, fire enchanted explosions, all sorts of various things that just dish out tons of fire damage to mercenaries. And in general, like, I can totally see this helmet being a very solid Trav helmet, especially because it's so cheap, and I'd like to talk about that for a second. So the recipe is Shael IO Ral, and Shael IO Ral is so dirt cheap that most people should be able to afford that, like, mid-ladder, probably before they even hit level 35. I'm not really sure exactly when I find my first IO rune, but I usually find an IO rune at some point around the same time I find a Dole rune, and Dole rune and IO runes tend to be pretty common. And the worst thing about Doles and IOs is that in general there's generally no recipes to use them on. So even if you do happen to find like 2 or 3, you don't really use them in anything. So they just kind of sit there. And granted, there is the white and the black recipe, but for the most part, like, once you've made your first white wand, you're pretty much golden, and unless you're doing like a early budget smiter and you want to make a black really early on, I mean, yeah, you can, but usually you end up finding something better before you end up making a black, unless you just never do. But the thing is that you just end up with a whole lot of IO runes, and so I think it's really cool that they did include the IO rune in these recipes. Now, with this particular recipe, I do think it's a very strong rune word. I do think it's very strong in the terms that it has that fire absorption and fire resistance. However, I would like to see some additional fire effect on it. I think it would be really cool if they added on a enchant on here. I think that would really cinch it. Give it like a 5% chance to proc level 5 enchant or something. Like, it doesn't have to be a particularly high level of enchant, but I feel like they're going with a theme. Every single one of these is themed. The first one was the cure, which was themed as poison. This one is fire, which is themed, you know, obviously as the fire helmet. Give it something that makes it stand out. This is 2.6 PTR, so these are not finalized items, which means that they can potentially be tweaked a little bit and changed into a more powerful version of themselves, or fixed in general. So I think it's important to remember that as we go forward, that they could potentially tweak it a little bit and make it a little bit better. Unfortunately, it does not have lifesteal, which does make it kind of a poor choice for a mercenary unless you have specifically a mercenary that already has a lifesteal weapon or armor. And as we all know, one of the most popular weapons in the game is Insight, right? And Insight does not have lifesteal, which does make a lot of these resistance helmets rather poor choices when you don't have any other form of lifesteal for your mercenary. I hate to say this, but it's almost as if I feel like all of these helmets should have like a minimum amount of lifesteal, maybe even just like 4%. But if all of these elemental helmets that they're creating had lifesteal, they would go a lot further as far as mercenaries are concerned. Now, I don't want to just show you an image. I think that's stupid. So I have them available for you to download. And you can download my item pack. I have all of these items in here. You can just load them in. You can also load them in on D2 LOD, by the way. And you can test them out, play around with them, put them on mercenaries, and see how well they work. This one in particular, I would assume that what you do is put it on your mercenary and take it to Trav and see how well he can sit there and eat Hydra fireballs. I also made a Hurricane Druid one, a Armageddon Druid one, and also a Barbarian one. And there are also ethereal versions here. And that's also very cool, is that the ethereal versions do have a pretty high defense of around 270, and that's just the Nightmare exceptional version. If you were to throw this in an elite helmet, I imagine the defense would probably exceed 300 or 400 defense, which is pretty dang sweet. And if you combine the fact that it already has faster hit recovery, really good defense, and then also a very good, like, specific resistance, whichever one that you're specifically choosing. These could be very situational helmets that you throw on your mercenary while you're farming a specific boss. Like, for instance, if you're farming Trav, you might choose the fire helmet. If you're farming, I don't know, Duriel, maybe you got him quest bugged and he's dropping you facets out of the wing wang. If you're farming Duriel, maybe, you've got the cold one on to counter the holy freeze. Or maybe you're fighting Andariel. Maybe you're farming Andariel over and over again and you're tired of your mercenary dying to the poison. So you grab the Cure helmet, which is the one that has the really nice poison and poison length reduction on it. There's also a pretty nice physical damage one, which would go good with the cows, for instance. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos. And as always, keep watching.